Let's do it live. All right. Welcome to America This Week, live on Monday. I'm Matt Taibbi.
And I'm Walter Kern from a secret basement hotel room somewhere in the Hudson Valley of New York.
Yeah. You're this is like the death throes for writers when you come down the home stretch. Well, I mean, look, you're writing a book, right? And this is the locked in a room until and not allowed out until you finish stage.
Okay, I'm not going to reveal the name of the hotel or even the city, but I will say this. You know how when you look for houses, they often point out that there are wonderful rooms in the basement, and they have legal egress, meaning meaning the window can open on this like well that has this corrugated wall around it, and you can maybe
you starve yourself for weeks. You can crawl out,
right, and maybe in a fire or a flood, you can maybe get out that thing. Well, I won't point my camera at the legal egress of my basement hotel room, the first time I've had one in a long time, but the windows are double security glass and do not open, and the sort of hole out of which I would have to climb is about 9 feet high, and there's no ladder in the corrugated lining of it. So should there be any difficulties at this hotel, I'll basically be on a sinking ship.
Yeah, you'll be a crispy critter.
Yeah.
So yeah. Well, I mean, hopefully it'll happen live on the show. We'll get some clicks. Definitely boost ratings temporarily. I'm kidding.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but you were locked in your secure location. We all know why. Yeah. It's bad luck to mention it. It's like when somebody's pitching a no-hitter, you don't say that it's happening.
I wish it were a no-hitter. As I look over the pages that I'm revising, I see a lot of foul balls and a
lot of walks and hit batsmen, but still technically you're on the way.
Yeah.
Folks may notice I have an elegant new background at home here.
You gave people time to notice for themselves, but you couldn't help announcing it.
Yeah, this is now a cheery place. Mentally, I feel uncluttered. So we'll see if that translates into a sharper hosting performance. Lots to go through this afternoon, including yet another kind of big investigative piece in the New York Times. But I think the most interesting thing, Walter, to start off with is the very real phenomenon now on kind of in the Trump administration, it seems to me, and in the kind of formerly MAGA world, there's all kinds of weird schisms breaking out. I think it's interesting and cool, but a lot of people are making a lot of hay out of it. But there's over the weekend there was the Turning Point conference, if I'm not mistaken, and let's listen to something that Tulsi Gabbard said this weekend. Do we have that clip?
I think the campaign was hard. You think what President Trump went through was hard, and it was. The road ahead will not be easy. I can attest personally that in my work as the Director of National Intelligence, the deep state is fighting us every step of the way. And it exists within every single federal agency. And so I feel the same frustration that I see many of you expressing on X or in different platforms about why aren't things going faster? Why aren't we getting results more quickly? I feel this frustration every single day. We are pushing hard. Know that they are pushing hard back.
So that's this is one of the storylines that's coming out. Tulsi saying that the deep state is still opposing us from within. Walter, do you buy any of that?
Well, I'm sure that the very nature of any sort of rule when you come into power in Washington is to be opposed by the inert adversaries of the past and the people who are struggling to have your job or take your power. So that's par for the course. The question is whether it's uniquely bad in this case. worse
Right.
worse than usual. I
Yeah.
imagine it is. I mean, if the outside is any indication of what's going on in public, on social media, and that level of conflict is an indicator of what's going on behind the scenes, I'm sure it's just as acute. Now, why she's saying it is the question. It's one thing to be facing obstacles. It's another thing to talk about it and sort of use it as an explanation of, I don't know, insufficient progress. To me, the Trump administration has moved quickly and radically and, almost disorientingly fast in so many ways that, suddenly we've got tariffs. We didn't even know what tariffs were a year ago. Suddenly we've got, this, that, and the other thing. But her base, I guess, wants blood. They want, trials. They want exposure. They want humiliation for the others. They want the Epstein list. They want, whether it exists as a list or not. So she's kind of got to keep them at bay.
I can't even keep track of which media figures and politicians are now on the naughty list and which ones are on the nice list. I guess Charlie Kirk is now on the outs, right? Because on
the outs with whom? With the MAGA, with the Trump people?
Yeah. Well, with the formerly enthusiastic Trump people who are now disappointed, right?
Well, Matt, but here's the thing. How can I put it? You get married, or no, you court someone and you finally marry them. And that's when the next phase of trouble begins, because you have a whole new slate of difficulties. All your energies have been trained on obtaining power, and now now it's a matter of keeping it. And so I think there are all kinds of people competing to, I don't know, distance themselves, distinguish themselves, create niches, have a smaller but maybe more intense sphere of influence. A lot of the people who supported Trump gained their influence by being dissident characters, right?
Mm-hmm.
But now they're going to go on being dissident characters only against the new powers that be, which are the ones they got elected.
Right.
Smart Alex and critics are going to keep smart alecking and keep criticizing. They don't suddenly all become cheerleaders and chorus girls.
Yeah, it's getting tough to keep track of. So let's look at listen in succession to two clips. One is, let's listen to 9 and 10. I think we got Laura Ingraham and Bannon.
Let's rate everybody at the end on insider outsider status.
Right. Yeah, we should do the Joaquin Phoenix thing. There we go.
There's a lot that's kind of bubbling under the surface, and I know you know what I'm talking about. So I'm going to ask a few questions to all of you. How many of you are satisfied? You can clap. Satisfied with the results of the Epstein investigation? Clap. Okay, I told you to clap. You guys aren't listening. I'm not going to grade you on a curve. So I was going to get to that. How many of you are not satisfied with the results of the investigation?
All right, we get it. Let's go on to Bannon if we can. Yeah.
In that arc of looking at how the deep state has tried to stop Trump and the MAGA movement, you can easily fit in the Epstein situation, right? If you want the full release of documents, the special prosecutor gets it. And here's why. Epstein is a key that picks the lock on so many things, not just individuals, but also institutions, intelligence institutions, foreign governments, and who is working with him on our intelligence apparatus and in our government. This is why it's a time for choosing now.
Okay. Look, everybody's going nuts over the Epstein thing. There was another clip that we want to get to with Tucker, but
who are they going to prosecute, by the way? Because he's dead, right? I mean, when they
we can always dig him up and prosecute him again.
But I mean, it's one thing to have disclosure of the documents involved and so on, but whose hide do they want? Is it
Just
them?
They, I think. Look, the Epstein thing to me is symbolic. I don't. I've never paid a lot of attention to that story. Obviously,
I paid way too much. Here's one of the downsides of being Walter Kern. You get on these sort of outsider topics early and you ride them all the way to town. And by the time everybody else is having their day, you're a little bit like, oh, how come nobody's talking about UFOs?
Right.
Epstein, what?
Yeah. But it means, symbolically, it has a lot of meaning to people because there were a lot of promises made, and we can show that clip later.
There were a lot of promises made by Trump's. There were a lot of promises made by some of Trump's people. It wasn't, as I remember, a big campaign issue. They're trying to retrofit this thing and say, Trump basically ran on Epstein truth. I don't see that was the case. I followed it pretty closely. And what's so funny is that to be concerned about this used to get you labeled QAnon or Q adjacent. And now it's everybody wants that Epstein truth. The New York Times, after many years of almost studied indifference, whatever.
Well, okay. And we'll get to that too, is, MSNBC is, as you saw, those are actually MSNBC clips because they are covering this. It's like the most important story to them. Well, let's just show let's see which one is this. This is the one with all the different people making promises. I'm sorry, which clip? Oh yeah, number SOT 6. Let's see this one just briefly.
That Jeffrey Epstein story is a big deal. Please do not let that story go.
Who has Jeffrey Epstein's
Black Book?
Black Book?
FBI.
But who? That is I mean, there's.
Oh, that's under direct control of the director of the FBI.
What the hell are the House Republicans doing? They have the majority. You can't get the list? Put on your big boy pants and let us know who the pedophiles are.
Would you declassify the Epstein files?
Yeah, I would.
All right.
I guess I would. I think that less so because, you don't know it. You don't want to affect people's lives if it's phony stuff in there because there's a lot of phony stuff with that whole world. But I think I would.
This isn't about Epstein or 9/11 or JFK or RFK. It is, but it isn't. It's about a bigger thing. If you're lying about that, you're lying about everything. Who's on the Epstein tapes, folks? Who's on the tapes? Who's in those?
Okay, we get it.
Be careful what you wish for as an influencer and podcaster. Matt, just think how terrifying it would be if suddenly we were given the ability to look into all the things with a complete view that we've talked about in our, me in a half-assed way, you in a much more thorough way. But what if they got there and they found out, wow, this is, what are we going to do here? There aren't that many people. Some of the people on the list are protesting their innocence. They're probably going to sue us now that lawsuits are $1 billion a piece. And we can't really deliver. How do we get out of that one?
Yeah, look, the big worry for me with the Epstein case, if there is one, is, are you not releasing it because some other government asked you not to because of some that would bother me.
The Israeli intelligence guy, I forget his name, came out today and denied it wholesale.
Okay, whatever. That worries me less than the other big development of the last few days. And let's look at Trump talking about the war in Ukraine. We have that clip.
Who's coming?
I speak to him a lot about getting this thing done.
It's him talking about Putin.
And I'm saying, well, that was a nice phone call. And then missiles are launched into Kiev or some other city. And I said, it's strange. And after that happens 3 or 4 times, you say, the talk doesn't mean anything.
Okay, so Walter, like the Epstein thing to me is kind of a whatever story, but if we're actually going to have, if this isn't posturing to try to get the war over, it's been a while now, and I would have, in Trump's place, I would have walked. The United States should have walked. I think should have walked away from Ukraine after the day after that visit, or the day after, the missile attacks on all the bombers. But we're still there. We seem to be doubling down. They're now talking about.
That's disappointing to me too. This other thing happens behind closed doors. I don't know who the witnesses are. I don't know how the cases are distributed. If there is a list, if there's not a list, what kind of evidence. But I can see Ukraine, with my own eyes, and it is a matter of pressing national interest. And I guess there's one problem is that we didn't talk to Putin for years. We just didn't talk to him that we know of. Now he's talking to him and he's saying he's an asshole. But,
right.
So once again, in a weird way, it was easy to say certain things before you were exposed to the primary facts. But I think you probably knew that about Putin beforehand.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed to me that there. I guess I was stupid enough to have some genuine hope that there would be a little bit of daylight between the old military policy and the new one, and we're gonna see the defense budget increased again while we're cutting everywhere else, and this situation, which scares the crap out of me, is now worsening. Trump is now talking about how wonderful it is that Ukraine's going to compensate us for weapons deliveries, and which means to me signals kind of a long-term thinking about how this is all going to work. And I'm not really interested in this engagement continuing long-term. So, but it's very interesting how all this is breaking up into different, schismata on the other side. It's fascinating, right?
It feels like the Empire Strikes Back right now, doesn't it? I mean, it feels like the dark forces, the ones that they were sworn to, avenge the people against, have rallied, and Trump has taken positions that are more orthodox, more conventional than we were expecting. Now, it's possible to imagine that we're in negotiations and we're at a stage of kind of brinksmanship. Is this war going to go on forever, or are we going to end it? Because if we don't end it, it's going to go on forever.
Right.
And that could lead to a settlement, a ceasefire, maybe a peace. Maybe that is indicative of an increasing pace and steep urgency in negotiations when they start really talking trash. I mean, it seems like with Trump, he talks trash about people right before he ends up hugging them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a different algorithm with Trump than we're used to. And I try to remind myself of that and not go into straight line projections as I would with more conventional administrations. So personally, I think all kinds of things could happen. I saw a story today. He's going to give Putin 50 days. You got 50 days to get out. That'll work.
Isn't that a Paul Simon song? 50
days to leave your
yeah, to
leave your former republic or your former
50 ways to leave your heart,
to leave Lvov.
Yeah, exactly.
To leave your Lvov.
Yeah. 50 days, 50 ways to leave your Lvovitz. Yeah, that's great. Or is it a Lvovchanin?
But you know,
remember.
but I also I can't help but realize too that this is kind of the season when I would probably do all my unpopular things. You know, you get your bill passed, you get World War III in the Middle East over with for the time being, and then you have all this schism and stuff at the end of the summer because you're going to go into midterm mode in January probably, and you want all the bad news and all the hurt feelings and all the internecine struggle to happen now. So one thing about Trump I've always noticed, my dad, who didn't like him, used to tell me, he said, why does he always lead with his chin? Why can't he ever consolidate his gains? His best weeks are always followed by his worst weeks, not by, some medium weeks. And I started to say, well, maybe that is how he works it. He decides when to have his worst weeks so that they can't decide for him. And it is the struggle time. And I dearly hope in the Ukraine situation, because that's one I care about a little more deeply than whatever justice for around Epstein might be. I hope we're going toward a peace. I think he promised that. I think his whole campaign was in some sense a repudiation of this kind of thing. And there's got to be a way.
Yeah, let's hope so, because otherwise, that is something that he did run on, right?
Yes, yes,
and you and I both know that it was a real factor in, internal discussions about, for instance, who was going to be the running mate, and who was going to have the ear of this president, and that sort of thing. So it would be very disappointing if it turned out to be the same old. When it comes to the democracy promotion, expansionist military policy everywhere. We haven't wrapped any of those things up yet. It's frustrating. But as you say, and there's also this thing with Trump, strictly as a media person, he makes a lot of what seemed to me like media unforced errors, like stuff that don't need to happen.
But Matt, that is exactly what I was just saying. You use that term a lot, and sports metaphors go 98% of the way toward explaining most reality. But my quibble with it is this: in politics, you're going to have ups and downs, and you want to. What if you want to control both of them? In other words, what if your unforced errors are those which you feel equipped to handle? And equipped to whose energy you feel equipped to contain. The idea that it's all out of control and in shambles has been floated over and over and over with Trump, and has never really come to much. I mean, he got reelected. He just passed this huge piece of mega legislation. He carried out a bombing of Iran, a direct bombing of this country that we've been playing footsie with for decades. Now he's got, now he's got some problems and some sort of contradictions and fighting parties in his big tent. But I'm not sure that these tensions aren't ones that he is happy to release for the moment, because he has some belief he can manage them.
Yeah, I'm sort of with this commenter Amp here. It's like, for instance, with the Epstein thing, if I were his media advisor, I would just, if they weren't going to release it, my cynical advice to any president in that situation would be to just stall. Never make an announcement. Never say anything about it.
But that's the suspicious element, and that I think is I think that's a point for my argument. They went ahead and did it. right after the big beautiful bill. They went to Axios with this memo. It wasn't ferreted out. They did it, which suggests to me that they have something of a plan for it, or things might be more complicated than we think. It wasn't a scoop. They went and did it at a point of great strength for them. Why?
Yeah. Why? I don't know. I mean, and this is a recurring thing with Trump. As you say, he you know, sometimes he just does things and it doesn't make any. I don't get it. Like, and for a while, I was willing to swallow the hypothesis that this was some kind of extra dimensional strategizing that I didn't understand. And I'm not talking about the things that he does that offend people on another level, like the deportations policy or whatever it is. It's just there are things that are more like messaging errors that I just don't get. I don't understand why he does them. But whatever, it's happening.
But there's one more factor that I think you understand well, and maybe our viewers don't. There seems to be in the offing a set of major charges that are going to be made, conspiracy that will be exposed and even prosecuted, but certainly talked about, involving large, issues from the past, Russiagate, etc. I would not be surprised if the Epstein investigation has a relationship to these in some way that
it was a bargain or something like that.
That I can't fathom. Imagine that there are a lot of people who can't testify because they're under blackmail, but can once the threat of blackmail is removed. If Epstein was all that powerful, and if his influence was as saturating as they suggest, then a lot of the people you might need for these coming investigations might look at you and say, "Hey, yeah, right. I'm going to do that with this hanging over me. Cut my strings, brother." And that could be possible. It could be that Trump traded stuff. But finally, the last thing I'm going to say is we don't understand this guy a lot of the time because he's doing things differently. And our view of politics was formed in the always do the most popular thing era of politics, and we never realized the kayfabe strategy of at least somehow staging your own conflicts in this they dismiss it as 5D chess or 4D chess, but in the end it's just a little higher level of media strategy than anybody else had in the past, which was formed in the era of network TV.
Yeah, this is the strategy that prosecutors use. If you have negative information, you want to introduce it on your own terms, not let the other side introduce it. That makes sense. That's nothing new, and that's something that even journalistic into consideration. You have to make sure that when you're about to release something, that you don't give the other side a lot of time to maybe launch a counterattack or the target of your investigation before you publish. Like, you want to be out before they do. But this is just, I think the Epstein thing in conjunction with Russia and the inability to wrap things up or to successfully apply any pressure on Israel is beginning to eat at a lot of his prior supporters. And you see there's kind of an open schism now with Tucker and some other folks who are big advocates of his. And Tucker gave a really interesting speech. We'll probably show a little bit of that later, which sounded a lot like a presidential speech, but we're reliably assured that it is not. But very interesting stuff. A lot of people are wondering, and there have also there's been a surfeit of stories about this and that official panicking, and maybe it was somebody who screwed up, and it wasn't really Trump who quashed this, and there's finger pointing going on within the administration, and people are coming out and issuing press releases saying everything is fine, nothing has changed. Kash Patel dispelling rumors that he's thinking about quitting. All bizarre.
Just talked to Dan Bongino. He sounded great, Trump said the other day. You know?
Yeah, he sounded great. Right. Yeah. Which that sounds like a mob movie, right?
Yeah.
You know, I knew it was you, Fredo.
He's my best friend. Don't touch my best friend. How's your family?
That's right. So,
Matt, can we just say one thing? 1 year ago today, you and I were landing at the Republican convention.
Oh my goodness.
In Milwaukee. 1 year ago today, Monday, trying to set up our crappy little computers in the very disorganized nook of the media center that we had been assigned. The lowest
influencers.
We got basically a fold-up plastic table in a building where Ben Shapiro had like limousine service to his set almost. I mean,
I know he had like a floating like an Air Force aircraft carrier type situation.
Yeah. I mean, I got to see Mike Lindell in person for the first time. I mean, come on. But I will say that in that year, 1 year to the day, did you expect we would be here?
No. For some reason I thought there was no possibility that Trump was actually going to win. I wasn't, or that he was going to take office. Let's put it that way.
And do you remember when we watched his speech? We're like looking at the watch.
Oh yeah, no, yeah. Yeah.
So I only say that to remind you that our oracular powers might be limited.
Well, of course they are. Mine aren't just limited; they're negative. I'm like next to Jim Cramer, the worst predictor of anything in the world. So, but worth noting, I think the natives getting restless on the releasing of information and winding down the wars front is interesting, because the first month or so of Trump's this term, with all of the releases and one thing after another coming out about USAID and other programs, that was kind of what a lot of people imagined this whole term was going to be. I remember talking to somebody pretty close to this administration saying they should just do nothing but just release stuff for the next 4 years. And they wouldn't even have to really do any policy work. If they just did this, people would probably be happy with it. And yeah, I mean, that might have worked. Who knows? But
well, now they're in the playing ball stage of things. I guess you just have to play a little ball, it turns out. Or maybe you don't have to, but maybe you want to, or you're afraid not to. Who knows?
Yeah, who knows? Okay, so while that is going on, and we got to keep an eye on that, and I think we definitely need to keep an eye on the war in Ukraine situation, because there's been a lot of worrying rhetoric coming out of there, stuff that frankly has me nervous again. But there was a big story, and this has been kind of a pattern with the New York Times in the last 2 or 3 years. When you have a big scandal, they will do like the 3,000 or 4,000 word reported sort of rewriting of history. That is like it's like what we were just talking about. It's the introduction of negative evidence or adverse evidence on your own terms,
right?
But you're not sure if you trust anything at all from the report. So they've done a big thing on Biden's use of the autopen, and it's kind of a fascinating story. Biden said he made the clemency decisions. And Walter, did you read this piece?
Yeah, I did.
So it's fascinating on a number of levels. First of all, it sort of proceeds from the assumption that you can answer the charge that Biden was not in control of himself or was not capable of making his own decisions just by having Joe Biden say that I made all the decisions. The big quote at the top of the piece, if you scroll down to the first big, I think it's the third paragraph, quote, I made every decision, Mr. Biden said in a phone interview on Thursday, asserting that he had his staff use an autopen, replicating his signature on the clemency warrants because, quote, we're talking about a whole lot of people.
And my hands gets tired.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a very strange sort of leading factoid, is that, okay, we interviewed Biden and he said this isn't true. That's really ultimately what this piece comes down to. It's a fairly large story. They did do an interview with him and they had a lot of quotes from him. Well, not a lot, actually, fewer than I would have expected.
I wanted to see him on a Zoom call, at least if I was the reporter for this, not just a phone interview, because I want to know if he's under duress, frankly. There are a lot of people whose lives will change for the worse if those pardons are very powerful people, if those pardons are deemed illegitimate. And I would think there's some pressure on Joe at this point by those people to make sure that shit stands up, So yeah. I want to at least see a wide frame just to make sure there's no pistol, next to the phone.
Yeah, actually, could our mystery producer look up the National Lampoon "Buy This Magazine or We'll Shoot This Dog" cover? And if
own this autopen or we'll shoot this ex-president.
Yeah, exactly. And that's really what it comes down to, because previous to this, there had been, I guess, Biden had given a series of written, here it is. Yes, if you don't buy this magazine, we'll kill this dog. That's the picture that we want to see, just to make sure that there's no pistol at Joe Biden's head. By the way, whatever happened to that dog?
That particular dog?
Yeah, somebody did a story about that dog. I can't remember.
He was killed. He was executed.
Was he?
Yeah, because people didn't buy the magazine.
And he looks so cute in the picture too, right?
I know. That was before AI, when you had to actually have a dog give you that frightened side eye. You had to go find one.
Right. You had to actually get that shot. Look, I'm not even shooting. No, that was an amazing picture, but we don't know. And this story, there's a really bizarre element to this, which is that Trump's own doctor, what's the guy's name? Kevin O'Connor.
You mean Biden's doctor?
Sorry, Biden's doctor. Kevin O'Connor was, I guess, last week being questioned.
We just got a message from our producer that the dog was shot and killed.
Was it really?
Okay, maybe that was a joke. Well, let's move on. But it made my heart.
Dog's name was Cheeseface. Yeah, so I seem to remember something odd about that, because there was a feature about the fate of that dog that some enterprising reporter did.
Well, you were looking off to the side. Our producer just inserted the message, no joke.
No joke. Yeah. God, that's terrible. That's like the, behind the music, National Lampoon behind the cover, right?
Worse.
That's right. 7 days. Yes. The Vermont's famous alternative newspaper, did right? It's a Vermont paper, isn't it? Yes. Yes. Okay. Vermont's Independent Voice. and yeah, we'll have to get to the figure out who's responsible for the death.
We've now given people the ability to research the matter on their own.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll return to that, but Biden's doctor is in the process, or was in the process last week, of being questioned by the Government Affairs Committee, if I'm not mistaken. Which committee was it? Committee on Oversight and Accountability. So is that Jim Comer? That's Comer, right? And he took the fifth. Biden's doctor pled the fifth. It's like that. We got to get them to our mystery producer to find Chappelle doing I plead the fifth, that routine. But we can actually see it. They submitted a written declaration statement on behalf of Dr. Kevin O'Connor. And on the second page of the declaration, it says the totality of the circumstances surrounding this committee's investigation leave Dr. O'Connor no choice but to decline to answer questions on two overlapping grounds. And the first is patient-doctor confidentiality, which
that's not the fifth.
That's not the fifth. The second one is, the pending Department of Justice criminal investigation leaves Dr. O'Connor no choice but to invoke his constitutional rights under the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution to any questions posed by the committee. I think they did a little redundant constitutional there. But so having Biden's doctor plead the fifth, or to invoke the fifth in a congressional inquiry, is really interesting. It could mean...
Is he under investigation? I mean, you plead the fifth because you are a person of interest or accused of crime or on trial for a crime.
If you have your own exposure.
Yeah. Is that what's happening? I mean, I don't know, but it looks bad. And the Times article for me is, if any I've ever seen reeks of getting ahead of a story, it's that one. I mean, they literally called him up and said, listen, you're going to need a good excuse in a few days. Can you give one? When he said there were a lot of names on there, I wanted the reporter to ask, how many of them can you recite to me right now?
How many of
those names? Biden's excuse for having to use the autopen or not be around when he was signing this stuff was that there were so many people he was giving clemency to, and it
was like 40,000 people. I mean,
and he had to do them individually.
No. He didn't do them individually. He did them all except for his son, except for Hunter. He used them all. He used the autopen in every instance.
No. But what I'm saying is his excuse in the piece is that the reason he used the autopen was that because there were so many documents.
Right.
But I would say, he said there were so many people on those. I'd say, if I was a reporter, will you name a few? Quickly, name a few of the people you pardoned.
Oh, right. That's what, to do that in the interview.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah. Well, that's why this interview with the Times is difficult to really assess, because it doesn't show you what he said, what he didn't say, whether he stumbled, whether he was helped, anything. All you get are we know it's a phone interview. We know that some things were said. We know he said that it was ridiculous and false, that that he was under duress.
Are there no rules governing this? Are there no rules at all? I mean, is an autopen just, how can I put it? Can you just sort of like making a martini, wave the vermouth over it and it becomes your signature or your intent? I mean, there's got to be some standards around this thing.
Yeah, so this came up the first time people had actually used the autopen. Remember, we've been through this before. The autopen was actually created by George Bush. It was never used by George Bush. Obama was the first one to use it. there was some controversy over how and in what situations it can be used. But my understanding is the legal territory around this is not terribly clear. They're claiming that they had a process by which they would obtain verbal approval for each one of these things. But
and I'm sure record that verbal approval, right?
Well, right, yeah, exactly. So in the story, they quote Biden's White House staff secretary, Mrs. Feldman. I'm not sure I even know who that is. Hang on a second, let me look. Stephanie Feldman, sorry. They also show that the use of the autopen was managed by Mr. Biden's White House staff secretary, Mrs. Feldman. She wanted to receive written accounts confirming Mr. Biden's oral instructions in the meetings before having it used to produce the warrants, recording the clemency actions. The email shows. So what they did is the White House turned over a series of emails that purported to show that they had a process for approving the use of the auto pen. And essentially what this story does is it says, we reviewed the emails and they appear to show, that it wasn't completely misused.
Did they show that they had a process or that the process was actually used?
So they didn't say the latter. In fact, there's an interesting part of the story where they make this bizarre admission. Mr. Biden did not individually approve each name for the categorical pardons that applied to large numbers of people. He and aides confirmed. Rather, after extensive discussion of different possible criteria, he signed off on the standards he wanted to be used to determine which convicts would qualify for a reduction in sentence. So he gave general guidelines, and that's a very strange thing to admit in the pages of the New York Times. Essentially what they're saying is he didn't individually approve each one of these pardons.
Sure.
He gave general guidelines to aides that he wanted them to apply when making decisions about which people to give to pardon. That doesn't sound right to me. I don't know the law exactly around the auto pen, but that doesn't sound like a
I think he's in big trouble, and I think a lot of the people who got clemency are in big trouble too, because they could be prosecuted, and it will be tested now whether or not there's a right to prosecute them or not. I mean, this is going somewhere that's pretty easy to predict. I think they're gonna have their feet held to the fire. I don't think talking about there being a process and sort of a culture of approval, but not specific approval. I mean, pardoning is the most specific of presidential powers, is it not? I mean, it's the one where you would most want consciousness of, who and what, and where you would want a sort of chain of custody around the documents. And because it involves letting people off.
Right.
It's not, it's not naming some teacher of the year or whatever, or, changing the entrance fees to a national park or something. It's, letting off Fauci or whatever, people around all kinds of controversial things. This isn't going anywhere good. And the New York Times, I think, knows it's not.
Well, no, not even the New York Times knows it's not. The mere fact that this article is coming out and is, to me, evidence that the targets of this investigation are ANSI.
Yeah.
And the law firms that are working on this story I think it's Latham and Watkins is one of them. What? Let me look.
Well, they're probably. I wonder if in some cases
Covington and Burling. Yeah.
In some cases, they're the same law firms that worked on the pardons for their clients.
Right. Yes. Right. This story, this kind of thing. I guess my point in bringing this out, Walter, is that this kind of story does not come out unless there's a pretty concrete. There's knowledge that something is about to spill into the public.
Right.
That is not going to look great.
Can you imagine the phone calls to some lawyers like, yeah, you got me pardoned. You didn't tell me that this was the pardon, that he didn't sign the damn thing, and that he wasn't in the room.
Yeah, that he's been asleep since 1973.
Right,
yeah.
and that in fact he didn't even maybe know my name. I was just part of a group for which he'd sort of waved a wand in a process. I'd be like, hey, I want some of that $800 an hour fee back, baby, until this is settled.
Yeah. It's very strange. And look, there's a lot of big names that are
like his family.
His family, but they're. This is what we talked about at the, what was it, before I think it was probably just before the new year last year when this issue first came up, and the question of who exactly ran the Biden White House, like who were those people? And there wasn't a ton of stuff out there in public about who was managing the day-to-day internal affairs of the White House. Unusually so, by the way, because there's almost always these big self-congratulatory stories that appear after a new administration comes to power about who all the main players are in the White House, right? And that's how these people become superstars. The Stephanophoulos, the James Carvilles, right? Karl Rove, all those people. But we didn't, like, how many people knew that Ron Klain was running the White House for 2 years at the beginning of Biden's last term? Did we ever hear that name in the press? Almost never. So all these people are wrapped up in this probe. It's Klain, Mike Donilon, Anita Dunn.
This is a little reminding me of like Risky Business. Biden's asleep. Wasn't there? It wasn't in this story, but I saw that some were given late at night, and they were specified that they were given late at night. Like what? That was in another story about.
Yes. Is this the one about Warren Cromartie? Yeah. Okay. This is there's a whole thing about Jeff Zients.
Yes, that's
approving a January 19th pardon. Let's see. That's right. It's a pardon of a former city councilman in Columbia, South Carolina, and it happened at like 10:28 p.m. And Jeff Zients hit a reply all to a bunch of people in an email chain and says, "I approve the use of the autopen for the execution of all the following pardons."
At 10:28 at night, the night before the inauguration?
No, this was on January 19th.
Oh, okay. And the inauguration was the 20 something.
Was it the 20th? It might have been the 20th. I can't even remember. But that's a little weird. For Jeff Zients, I approve the use of the autopen. What does that mean? How do you approve the use of the autopen? And so it's
why didn't somebody write back and say, but can I hear that from the president? In other words, that's already established protocol that this guy can call up right late at night and you just take his orders and take his word for it?
It sounded a lot to me from reading this and a couple of other stories that there were no written sort of communications chains at all up until a certain point, up until this became a controversy. and people started announcing their intention to investigate this matter, it doesn't sound like there was a ton of documentary record that was being left in each case. So
this is like the White House dog sitter probably could have gotten some people pardoned if it was this loosey-goosey. What they're going to show, and what I think they'll try to investigate, is whether or not there was any even real regular chain of command. Did it always go from him to somebody? Was it just anybody above a certain level could kind of speak for the president? It's not going to be good.
No. And, all of these people, plus the doctor, plus one of Jill Biden's top aides, the fact that they've already zeroed on those folks, and we're also starting to see more stories about Ed Martin, because he was he plays the role of the overzealous U.S. attorney or former acting U.S. attorney, who is trying to get up everybody's backside about all this.
Right.
And there were a lot of hit pieces about him early in the Trump presidency because he was going after the law firms. Now it looks like those are starting to resurface, but I can't get around the fact that Biden's doctor invoked the Fifth with Congress. There's just I can't figure out
over what alleged offense is he against? What alleged offense is he defending himself? Perjury? Did he give testimony earlier that he'd be contradicting?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, and part of the thing about the Fifth is that you're not supposed to draw inferences from it, or affirmative inferences from it, right? But it's awfully strange. And
I saw immediate suggestions that they immunize him. He's really the least of the targets, I would think. The doctor, let him. Okay. Who I think ran the Biden White House? Law firms.
Well,
the more I hear all this stuff, the more I think that we are living in a world of super law firms that each kind of have a piece of the pie and have divided things up, and they can both defend you and go after you, and they hold all the cards, and they just kind of, in the vacuum of power that the Biden administration offered, moved in big time.
Yeah, and a lot of these big firms have people who are serving in very high positions, and they just sort of leave a desk waiting for them for when they come back, and it's almost like giving a hostage to another side in war, right? Like, this is how you guarantee the safety of your firm, and you take care of your clients is by making sure that you have somebody from your firm high up in the current administration. Well, that's not happening with this administration. I mean, the pattern is broken, right? You're not getting a whole bunch of people from Covington and Burling or Jenner Block or any of those firms who are going to help out with this matter. So the firms themselves are already making deals to head off further investigation of them and about other issues, some of which people might think are fanciful, some of which sound more serious. But this whole thing sounds like a big bag of shit that's about to hit the fan. The timing of the story makes me think that somebody's about to come out with something. So, but we don't know what it is. And by the way, we should note, let's listen to what Trump said. This is SOT 4, and this is Trump talking just today about this question.
I mean, you're talking about the autopen. Look, the autopen, I think, is maybe one of the biggest scandals that we've had in 50 to 100 years. This is a tremendous scandal. And I know the people on the other side of the, see that desk, that Resolute desk? Unfortunately, he used it before me. But, you know, we have our choice of 7 desks. They're all beautiful, but I chose the Resolute, and so did he, unfortunately. But the people on the other side of the Resolute desk, I know them. Lisa, the whole group, and they're no good. They're sick people. And I guarantee he knew nothing about what he was signing. I guarantee it.
Okay, so that's typical Trump, right? I mean, he talks in maximalist terms. I guarantee that Biden knew nothing about what he was signing. That's, you know, that's writing a pretty big check that you would have to cash in public later. But
he has yet to demonstrate any knowledge, however, because the New York Times piece was strangely free of specific stipulations about knowledge. It talked about a culture, it talked about a process, it talked about there are too many of those, you know, it's all quite confusing, but he has yet to show affirmative knowledge. He has yet to bring forth an email that says, hey, can you go use the autopen tonight to do X in my name?
Yeah, one of the most striking passages in this in the story reads like this: most former Biden officials have selected their own lawyers at different firms, and although there has been some communication among them, there is no unified legal strategy. And so the former aides have at times charted different paths in responding to the requests from Capitol Hill, according to people familiar with the matter. Now, that's extremely vague reporting about an extremely interesting detail, which is that everybody's lawyered up and they're not working together. But they're, again, as you say, Walter, the piece is kind of short on specifics. It doesn't make a lot of specific denials, except for Biden's own statement that he made every decision. Beyond that, there's nothing in here except a whole bunch of sort of TikTok chronology about what happened.
If I was writing a thriller, a John Grisham novel, you know, the firms, plural, rather than the firm, I don't know that I would want the character of Joe Biden around a lot longer.
Yeah. Oh, an Agatha Christie thing? Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
Murder on the Delaware Express.
Yeah. All of the heads, all of the full partners of the major Washington law firms decide to take a trip on the Acela with Joe back down to Washington, and something mysterious happens.
Oh my God! Yes,
like,
it would have to be.
It'd be like Double Indemnity, where you know he doesn't get off the train. You know, at the
right.
end.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
We went over a lot of bridges, maybe. But
there's that one high bridge over a river on the Acela that I always think about being a scene in some kind of murder plot. But yeah, it would have to be like murder on the Acela. And look, you're absolutely right. All these people have to be very nervous about the continued existence of Joe Biden. Even the doctor. I mean, this thing, and the New York Times they're really going out on a limb here. The story doesn't really say anything except that we had an interview with him
on the phone.
Yeah, on the phone. It didn't say he was remarkably cogent,
right.
or he didn't once need to be take a break, or
who else was on the phone.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
But not to really be facetious, to be serious. Do you know how much pardons are worth in the real world? Do you know how much clients pay in order to obtain a pardon to law firms?
They've put a figure on it, right? I forget what the number is, but
and when you have given out more of them than ever in these huge categories, you have created a practical industry. I mean, not just a boutique product, but a product at scale, pardons as a service in Washington, D.C. For what events can we charge clients who might be tangentially, I mean, I can almost imagine law firms like, I know you don't feel like you're in much peril on the COVID thing or the January 6th thing or whatever, but you might be, and you might want to be part of the language we're proposing.
Right. Yes, exactly. And here, by the way, here's our fee.
Well, yeah. I've heard it's a cool $1 million for a pardon, at least. I mean, not for everyone and not in some written way, but that the practice and standards around pardons do involve often very high fees.
And it's not even just about the pardons either. I mean, and this is something Glenn Greenwald tweeted about this, I think, this weekend. If we can see this. Oh, no, it was today. He said the biggest scandal of the last 5 years isn't that corporate media united to lie to the public about Biden's cognitive decline, though that is a gigantic scandal. It's that unelected people exploited it to run the country in secret in Biden's name. And we still just, we know fuck all about how any of these decisions about anything were made, about Ukraine, about Nord Stream, about anything. So the pardons are just a window into this other larger
exactly
thing that encompasses all kinds of stuff, including how Biden came to not be in the race anymore, how Kamala came to be chosen as the running mate, all sorts of crazy things, and we don't have any idea right now.
If I had been the New York Times running that story, I would want to have seen in at least one case a written record of instructions specifically to use the autopen in some specific case. I would not have settled as a reporter for there was a process or I was aware of or whatever. I would have wanted to see some record or at least a log or at least a TikTok showing times and giving the details of calls that led from Joe Biden to a single use of the autopen in one case.
Yeah, they got the one instance of Zentz doing it in his own name, but I didn't see
that falls a little short of going all the way back to the bedroom of Joe Biden.
Right.
What we're going to find out from the doctor is that he was in an induced coma for 3 days that nobody knew about, and a bunch of stuff happened.
So they did ask Biden in this interview about the pardon of that South Carolina city councilman, and there is a quote from Biden saying, "I agreed with Jim," that's James Clyburn, who former aides say lobbied him afterward, after a church service to help Mr. Cromartie. "I agreed with Jim and I pardoned him," Biden said. But that refers to the nighttime pardon that you see down here with Jeff Zients.
That is the most legalistically ambiguous statement I've ever seen.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't touch this with a 10-foot pole if I were a reporter. I'd be very, very nervous about all this. What exactly does this mean? Did he approve it in a post hoc fashion? Did he approve it to Clyburn at the time, and that somehow got back around to his staff? And I mean, there's just a lot in there that's not explained. And you see that they talk about the emails show that an aide to Mr. Siskel sent a draft summary of Mr. Biden's decisions at that meeting to an assistant to Mr. Zients. at 10:03 p.m., the assistant forwarded it to Mr. Reed and Mr. Zantz asking for their approval. Why don't we see the whole emails? What's not in that? Why aren't they showing us those emails? Why aren't they telling us exactly what they say? Just the bizarre characterization of these things. I don't know. It gives off an odor, let's just say, to me. But so do a lot of things that presidents do. I just think that this story is a particularly huge one, and this is just a signal that we're about to get into some stuff.
Yeah, we're going to hear the fifth. We're going to hear the Fifth Amendment pled a lot in the next few months. I have a feeling,
and not just about this story. As you mentioned, we've gotten some indications that there's some stuff coming on, maybe some other topics. But this one for sure looks like something's coming, and this is a classic sort of preemptive. Let's get some things out there in public before we have to answer them, so we don't look like we're on the defensive. But it's a remarkably weak piece. Apart from the quote from Biden, it doesn't say a whole lot.
If I was the editor of the Times, on the phone with whoever the powers that be are, I'd say, okay, we gave it our shot, man. You didn't give us much. We did our best. We spread the butter as thinly across the bun. We got to the edges, I think. Here, you eat it.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Sometimes, and it's particularly distressing when you see that the best that the PR people can come up with is really uninspiring. That means that they're like,
yeah,
man, I don't know what to do with this. When they start mailing it in, you got problems, right? So really bizarre. Okay, I want to play a little bit from Tucker's speech, just because I thought this was really, really interesting. He's been taking a lot of guff lately for a variety of things. But let's just listen to his. And by the way, Walter, you are now. I guess we're in our 5th hour of Walter's interview with Tucker being up. I haven't watched it yet, so I'm very much looking forward to doing so as soon as this is over. So
yeah, I was just to clarify, I was interviewed by him a couple of weeks ago, and it just was released today.
Just dropped.
So it's not like I went from Tucker to this show or something. It's been in the can. So
far, I'm hearing nothing but great things. So it sounds like he killed it. But looking forward. All right, let's hear. And by the way, we should block out some time to talk about what you said on the show in our next segment.
Sure.
Later this week. But let's listen to what he says in this speech.
At some point, the basic economics really matter, and they matter because not that it's bad that rich people are getting richer, it's bad that everyone else is getting poorer. And it's especially bad that young people can't afford homes. Let me just put a very precise point on this. If you want a measure of how your economy is doing, I personally favor eliminating GDP as a measure. I don't even know what that is. It's clearly not relevant. They tell me Japan has a stagnant GDP. Have you been to Tokyo? It's the single most radicalizing experience you'll ever have because it's just so nice. You lost the war? Really? Can we lose a war and wind up like this? My measure is really simple. I got a bunch of kids. Can they afford houses with full-time jobs at like 27, 28? And the answer is no way. And the answer is that 35-year-olds with really good jobs can't afford a house unless they stretch and go deep into debt. And I just think that's a total disaster. That's a complete disaster. Why? 2 reasons. One, if people don't own things, they don't feel ownership of the country they're in. And the country gets super volatile because people feel like they've got nothing to lose. When you have a lawn, trust me, you're thinking long term. Second, it's really hard to have a family without a house. It is. It's like super fun to live in an apartment if, there's like a bar downstairs, you're in a cool neighborhood. I'm in East Village. It's so cool. Try to have 3 kids. You're not going to have 3 kids there. You can't. Nobody wants to raise their kids in that neighborhood. Nobody wants to raise their kids in an apartment. People do it because they have to. Nobody wants to. And so the only young people in general that you will ever meet who have houses are young people whose parents help them. And God bless their parents. That's a perfectly great thing to do for your kids. But most people's parents can't afford to do that because they're already in debt from their pointless college degree. So that is a national emergency. One of the reasons it's happening is because normal people with normal jobs no longer believe they can win in this system and that all the money is going to the worst people.
So that sounds a lot like what Trump was saying last year, ran on, right? And that's a message that has a tremendous amount of appeal, admitting that. The Democratic Party hasn't been able to say that. The new Trump administration seems to be more interested in some other issues than that at the moment.
But to be fair, we're seeing rising wages for the first time in a long time. We're seeing fairly good employment. Interest rates are too high, and Trump is talking about getting them down. They're a huge factor in affordability of homes. The Fed right now is one of the obstacles, but structurally, it also has to do with immigration. Frankly, I mean, the demand for housing in general is also a feature of the number of people who need housing. So I'm not saying that Trump isn't that some of Trump's policies might not affect this, but he's not articulating it as such in this way. And most of what Tucker just said is manifestly true, by the way. I mean, it just happens that in my journey through this vale of tears with a couple of children, I'm somewhere in the same phase that he is with children who've left college, and what he's saying is true.
Absolutely.
And it's a problem because as I said, I was talking to somebody the other day about national security, and I said, you know what the biggest contributor to national security is? People having love of the country that they wish to defend.
Right.
People having something to defend, having not just a stake in it, but a love for it, an actual affection for it. And that comes of not just being invested in it, but liking what you're invested in, and to me, that's the part of the formula that's been forgotten in America. We can have all the bombers and cyber warfare experts in the world, but we're going to be most secure if we want and love that thing which we're protecting, and not having a family, not having a house, not having a path is a national security issue.
Yeah.
If I want to be Peter Sellers, the children must have homes or they will not fight the Red Menace.
Right. Well, look, this is the volleyball that's been passed around, between the various types of or phyla of populist in the last couple of decades. And when the Democrats had an opportunity to kind of redo their message after losing to Trump the first time, they should have oriented around that exact problem. The Bernie movement was trying to push them to answer that specific question, and they didn't do it. They ran on Russia instead. Then they, the second time around, they ran on national security issues. They ran on threat to democracy, all this stuff. And they basically punted that whole issue to that issue and frankly, like the free speech issue and some other things.
And I think they're still ambivalent about it. I really want to be fair because this is an issue that means a lot to me, like I said, personally, and to my family. Just last week, a policy was instituted in which loan applicants could use the rent they were paying as an indicator of their fitness for a mortgage. That was not allowed apparently by at least on federally backed loans or something before, and now has been. That's a step in the right direction. I think they've made a number of steps in the right direction on this issue. But remember Kamala did address it, and she said something like they were going to build a bunch of houses somewhere. And remember, that was like one of the few specific policy matters that she spoke of. They were going to do something about, I don't know, giving people $20,000 or something. And
I can't remember what her
yeah, what leaf of the salad that was. But in any case, yeah, Tucker's giving it the old kapow there. He's putting it on the line, and I think that's a big issue. And that's what populism means to me. That's the version of it that I personally find most appealing. How can the population increase its satisfaction and security in this society?
Yeah, when you burrow under all the other things that we're told we're supposed to be caring about at the moment,
right?
It comes down to the fact that it's true. I mean, you unless you're extremely lucky, unless you get very fortunate in life and you make a lot of money early, which doesn't happen to a lot of people anymore. You're going to be 40 or 45 before you're even close to in a position to buy a house. And by then, and as he points out, you can't start a family until you have a place to live and you have at least some expectation you're going to be able to take care of them. And that's a problem right now. We don't have that for young people. That's why there's this huge soaring number of people who do not have party affiliations in that 18 to 20-year-old range. And it's going to be expanding wildly until this is fixed. So
I didn't see all of Tucker's speech. I don't know what he proposed should be done about this.
Right.
I would just to throw my hat into the ring. I'm not running for anything, but one of our big problems out in communities like mine is that so much of housing has been converted into short-term rentals. Just to flail a hobby horse of mine, Airbnb, I don't like you. I don't like what you've done. I don't like that you've turned the neighborhoods of America into hotels, basically, and also financed the purchase of homes, not for people to live in, but to be rented out and so on. There's a lot of legislation around that industry that could open up supply. But remember when we were over covering the Canadian election, according to our listeners, and they came out with this dystopian sort of policy paper about the future of Canada, in which they said there was basically going to be no path to upward mobility or home ownership unless you had an inheritance. And we went, oh, Canada. Well, we're not far behind.
Which is unfortunate, and it's distressing that we don't have too many political leaders who are coming up with. And we talked about this a year ago. A year ago, the reason there was all this, there was like ebullience at the Republican convention because there was this feeling that they own the future, right? Like they were embracing this weird entrepreneurship that was going on the internet. And they didn't think 99% of their messaging wasn't the future sucks and we have to correct everything, all the horrible things we've done in the past. Like there wasn't a lot of optimism with their opponents. And it's unfortunate that not many people have come up with a way to be positive about the future. And I don't know.
Except me on Tucker. I go right after this podcast. If you haven't had enough of my fucking grating voice, and listen to me for another 2 hours as I attempt to be optimistic in a somewhat original and articulate way. But I will say this. I think things are trending in a better direction. I do think, my new theme is going to be, it's time for labor to make its move. It's time for organized labor to cut itself in on the deal, because whatever you think about other Trump policies, organized labor is looking at a labor shortage in America that it could exploit for purposes of raising wages and gaining, a bigger seat at the table. And I don't know that they will do that by simply lending themselves to the, protests and so on. I would really, if I was big labor, want to get up there in Washington and say, you're going to need us badly. You've got fewer workers. You've got a manufacturing base that you want to bring back to the country. You have all these goals in the name of national security, reshoring various industries. Let's talk. That's what I want to see happen in America. That's my next, that's going to be my next obsession.
All right. Well, it sounds good. But anyway, that happened. And, once again, it looks like the various factions of the kind of populist movements are at each other's throats over these things. But we'll see how it all comes through in the end. But worth noting, and worth noting on the Biden autopen issue, that there is this direct contradiction between the two main characters, right? Trump is saying Biden didn't know anything. Biden saying I made all the decisions, and it sure sounds like some rubber is about to hit the road on that business. Well, it's all kind of interesting that we're talking about this before we get into the next section of Scoop, because what ends up happening in this novel by Evelyn Waugh that we're talking about, it's a lot of it is really about fake news, right? And how all the different reporters settle once they get to Ishmaelia, and how the press drives events. Things are sort of reverse engineered to a degree that people may not understand. The imperatives of the business often dictate the real events that happen, and that's what happens in this part of the book. I don't know, Walter, should we recap what happened, how we got here, and where we are in the story?
Yeah, it's easy. It's easy to recap it. I mean, William Booth, nature columnist and country boy in England, is mistaken for this fashionable novelist, and is sponsored by a society lady, such that he gets an assignment from his paper, where he usually writes about voles, badgers, and grebes, to go to an African country which is experiencing something like a civil war. But when you get there, it turns out it's something less than a civil war. As one guy says, when they go out to collect the taxes in the mountains, they always get a little pushback. That seems to be a lot of what has been construed as a civil war. It has white shirts in it. In other words, it has a fascist and a Marxist element. But what it really is one ruling family that's kind of, having some internal problems. But anyway, when they get there, and when Boot gets there, they're all looking for news. But one of the first things you learn is you can't really leave the capital. There's no chance to get out where the story is. And so it's kind of a competition to manufacture something, basically. And one guy kind of thinks he has, but there's a wonderful moment there, and maybe you have it in front of you. I have it on a Kindle
with the telegrams.
Well, where they discuss why you don't call each other out on false stories. How if you start doing that, the whole thing falls apart.
Oh God, yeah. Wait, I do have that somewhere. Hang on a second.
Because William Booth, somebody sort of recommends innocently that this fake story about a Russian spy or a Bolshevik agitator who actually is just some employee of the railroad or something.
Well, right, yeah. So okay, I do have it, and let's back up and explain how this whole thing happens. So there. All of the correspondence, and by the way, this is described as the epochal happening in the history of Ishmailia is the arrival of like 14 Western correspondents in the country. Like nothing of even remotely similar importance has ever happened in the place. And they get on a train, and there are 3 first class cars that are mostly taken up by an American film company. And then there's 14 extra spots that involve journalists. And one of them is Wendell Jakes, the famed American, very wealthy news writer. And it's really funny. They're all gossiping about what Jakes is doing, and one of them says, Jakes is already urgenting 800 words a day. And so the other one says, Jakes is here, well, there must be something in it. In other words, if he's here, there must actually be real news.
Right.
And then at that exact moment, I think this is Corker who's talking. He says, who's the important little chap with the beard? They look toward the customs shed through which the Swiss was being obsequiously conducted. You'd think he was an ambassador, said Corker bitterly. And it's basically just an Ishmaelite, a ticket taker on the train who just happens to have a beard.
Right.
And one of the reporters thinks it looks a little funny, and this turns into a series of
it turns into Russiagate.
It turns into Russiagate, exactly. Let's see.
For a moment,
yeah. Let me find the exact telegraphs they send back, because it's really funny. Okay. International Gendarmerie proposed prevent clash, test reactions unnatural. No, that's not it. Wait. Basically, it ends up being Jakes who sends back an authoritative telegram. London Echo reports Russian envoy arrested, arrived Saturday, disguised railway officials stop. Moscow denies stop. Deny or confirm with details. Deny or confirm. And then another one said, world scoop, congratulations, continue Echo. Then there's another one from the Twopence. Kindly investigate authenticity, alleged special Soviet delegation stop, cable deferred rate. So what he means by cable deferred rate, and there's another really funny section in this. The Twopence is like the lefty paper, and they don't have enough money to send telegrams. So what he ends up doing, the Twopence writer, instead is send by post what we call evergreen stories.
Right.
The
ones that you used to do at time, like,
yes,
new thinking on the Virgin Mary.
Right, exactly. Things that'll be true tomorrow will continue to be true. But finally, there is a denial issued by the railway minister. It is categorically denied that there is any Russian diplomatic representative accredited to the Republic of Ishmailia, nor is there any truth in the report spread by subversive interests that a Russian national of any description whatsoever imbibed in Jacksonburg last Saturday. The train was occupied exclusively by representatives of the foreign press and one employee of the railway.
You know what I love about that?
What?
Even though as a reader of the book, it's true, it shows you that all denials sound inauthentic.
Right, exactly.
Exactly.
It's like the LBJ thing. Remember when he did that whole thing where he accused, when he was running for a House seat, he spread the rumor that his opponent was having sex with pigs, and some aide said, Jesus, Lyndon, we can't get away with calling the guy a pig fucker. And he says, yeah, but let's let the son of a bitch deny it, And that's kind of how news works, right? So sort of joyfully after this, maybe not joyfully, William, who's sort of getting the hang of the newspeak that you identified in the last show, he sends a telegram back. All rot about Bolshevik. He is only ticket collector. Ass called Shumble throughout thought his beard false, but it's perfectly all right. Really, will cable again if there is any news. Very wet here. Yours, William Boot.
Very wet here. What's the funny thing about that telegram is he hasn't gotten the hang yet of the condensation necessary to save the paper money.
Right. Yeah.
He's still trying to speak English. What I love is that when the details in this story are so great. When the telegrams arrive in Ishmailia, the general process of distributing them is that they just wait till there are a bunch of them, and then they go around town saying, "Does this sound like it's for you?"
Right.
And people have to claim the telegram as though that sounds like it's probably to me. They're not private at all. Ishmailia is funny because even though it's supposed to be a complete shambles, Waugh has a kind of affection for it compared to these people who are pretentious, lazy, and
destructive.
I'm reading another novel right now that's kind of in this vein, Robert Stone's Dog Soldiers. And if you haven't read it, we're going to have to do it someday. But at the beginning, this reporter, the main character of the book, the second main character, is in Vietnam for his father-in-law's tabloid magazine, basically. And you see again that almost all writers, and in search of stories when there is insufficient news or insufficient good news or whatever, are contrasted horribly with the people who are just trying to make a living off them, and you go, just like in this story, the people you most want to see succeed are like the shoe shine boys and the telegraph bringers and the
boys who are the fixers, basically.
Right, the fixers. The natives, so to speak, are always cleverer and, I don't know, just more honorable, even in their mischief, than these damn correspondents.
And they're also really funny. There's a scene, the American film company, they get robbed of 5 miles of film from the train, and they're complaining about it. And one of the fixers says, they love film. Him build a great big fire or something like that. In other words, they use it to make fire.
The train they're all coming in on has as its last car the car that carries all their luggage, and at some point they discovered it detached somewhere on the trip, and they come to the official and say, can we maybe mount a search for the luggage car that fell off, sometime during the night? And he's like, not really,
it's all gone. Yeah. So here's that passage you were talking about. So this is Boot talking to Corker, who's basically like his, in a lot of Waugh's novels, there's a character like this who's like sort of a person of experience who explains to the innocent protagonist how things work, and he says, it's that nasty bit of work with the beard. I knew he was going to give us trouble. And then Boots says, but he is a railway employee. I saw him in the ticket office today when I went to ask about my luggage. And Corker says, of course he is, but what good does that do us? Shumbles put the story across. Now we've got to find a red agent or Boyle, or explain the mistake, said Boot. Risky old boy and unprofessional. It's the kind of thing you can do once or twice in a real emergency, but it doesn't pay. They don't like printing denials, naturally. Shakes public confidence in the press. Besides, it looks as if we weren't doing our job properly. It would be too easy if every time a chap got a scoop if the rest of the bunch denied it. And I will hand to Shumble. It was a pretty idea. The beard helped, of course. Might have thought of it myself if I hadn't been so angry about the luggage. So this is like 1-to-1 what's happening today, right? The whole thing about confidence in the press, right?
It is an absolutely trenchant and subtle and perfect criticism of what is wrong with the press, in that they cover for each other. They try to hold out the prestige of the institution as such as more important than the accuracy of the mere stories. And it's a kind of a conspiracy of incompetence in many cases. Sometimes, in this case, it's not even a conspiracy of incompetence. They know the guy's lying, but they need the right to lie when it's their turn.
Exactly. And this Corker character, who's, God, I forget the name of the character in Decline and Fall, who's just like it, Captain something or other, but he lays it out exactly the way. I mean, that this whole thing about how, yeah, you can do it once or twice, but in the long run, it doesn't pay. It shakes public confidence in the press. And, you know, it would be too easy if every time one of us got a scoop for everybody to deny it. And there is, I remember with the first time I read this book, I remember it vividly. I was really young. I think I was maybe 22, and I just started doing this work, and I met this photographer in Uzbekistan, of all places, and he had a copy of this book. And when I read this the first time, I thought, well, this is absurd. That would never happen. It's still funny. Now, having lived all these years, we know it's absolutely true. I mean, like this whole thing about turning some guy who's incidentally black on the train, like the person with the beard, they've turned an African into a visiting Soviet ambassador. It's exactly what we just went through, and it's not ridiculous at all. It happens over and over and over again, and it's happened repeatedly in our history. And it's incredible that when life catches up to satire to this degree, it's you really have to start wondering.
Well, to digress slightly, have you seen the movie 3 Days of the Condor, the 70s thriller?
Oh, love it.
So based on a movie called 5 Days, a book called 5 Days of the Condor, they shortened it to 3, written by James Grady, a Montanan. And anyway, in that book, Robert Redford's job as a CIA agent is to be part of this library in New York, this small group that's headquartered in a library. And they just read novels for ideas about how to perform missions and tricks they can play. That's the whole job. I swear he must have known something. I mean, you look at 1984, you look at Scoop sometimes, and you go like, or Catch-22, they're getting ideas from satire.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And, it's the, how can I put it? It's the satire deep state cycle. First it starts as satire, then the deep state does it. Then somebody in the deep state writes a novel exaggerating it. Then the next generation reads it, and they get better and better at all the bad shit they do. And
it's probably true, right? There probably is an office of novel awareness somewhere, right?
Office of satirical inspection.
Yeah, exactly. And remember, that's that's what Martin Gurry sort of did for a living, right? He just read the news for the CIA. Now he was doing conventional analysis. He wasn't like trying to get ideas for how to for stories to make up, but it wouldn't be outlandish at all for this kind of thing to happen. And but this idea about how fake news takes place is. You realize that it's not that hard to pull off. All you really need is like somebody who's willing to say, well, I can't deny that is possible, right?
Right.
And then you're off and running, you know, at that point. And
then there's a rule that you need to remember, young journalists. Provoking a denial is almost as good as getting confirmation, or maybe better. You know, I mean, reverse confirmation. I didn't get it confirmed, but I did get them to deny it. And then the next story can be Russian embassy denies having, you know, agent on train in Ishmailia or whatever. The other thing I love about this group of people are their names.
Paleolog.
Just give a few of the names of the group of reporters of the press corps there.
Let's see. Shumble is one of them. Hang on a second. I'll find them all.
Corker, of course.
Corker's the Wendell Jakes. I got to find the thing with the French, because the French protesting that they didn't. Welper, Piggy. Let's see. There are some others, but yeah, there's a very funny thing in here. But there's two things that are really funny. One is that there's a scene basically where the somebody comes around to all the reporters. This guy named Paleolog, he's an Ishmaelite,
right?
And he meets Corker and he pitches him. He says, "You've got to have boy for yourself in this country," he said. "Yes," said Corker, "it seems I ought. I fix him. I find you very good boy from Adventist mission. Read, write, speak English, sing hymns, everything. Sounds like hell to me. Please?" "Oh, all right, it doesn't matter. Send him along." In this way, Paleolog was able to supply servants for all the newcomers. Now, for people who haven't been in like an expat situation, this is exactly the way the news is done in far off posts, because most of the reporters don't speak the languages. So they become highly dependent upon these fixers who get together and they basically create the news that goes back to the West. They decide what the major storylines are going to be. They figure out how they're going to be able to help themselves with their various assignments.
Then they sell their influence to the government and say, "Listen, I've got this reporter on the line. He doesn't know damn thing about our country. I can get him to say anything. What do you want him to say, and how much you willing to pay me?"
Exactly. And then it becomes a fight to see who can get the best fixers, right? And the best fixers are usually the ones who are the highest paid, who are able to grease the other officials
right
on the other end of the line. So there's always this thing, and Waugh really captures it here, where the Americans typically do really well in this situation, not because they have any initiative or they work harder, but just because they throw around a lot more cash than everybody else, and so they get the best information, and that leaves everybody else out in the cold. And there's a hilarious scene where the French and I think who else is it might be the French and the Scandinavians get together, and they decide that they're going to have to protest. And there's a line like, "Well, what happens after we protest and nothing happens?" "Well, we have to protest again." So they get together and they send a group letter. "We, the undersigned members of the French press in Ishmailia, protest categorically and in the most emphatic manner against the partiality shown against us by the Ishmaelite Press Bureau, and that the discourteous lack of cooperation of our so-called colleagues." And of course, that goes nowhere and does nothing. But they feel better that they've written the letter. And it's little things like that. The fact that the Two Pence is writing evergreen features because they can't afford telegrams. Like this is the kind of stuff that actually matters in journalism that people don't know about.
They're not allowed to leave the they're not allowed to leave the Capitol. Okay,
Right.
so let me give you an example of this from my own life. Years ago, I went to not many years ago, the Cleveland Republican Convention in 2016, and Donald Trump. Here's this big story: the interloper will, he's just been nominated. He's going to speak, and I'm talking to some other press people, and I say, well, you're gonna be over there tonight? I better head over. The lines are long, the security, to get in. And they're like, no, we're all watching together from a viewing lounge at some restaurant. And I thought, wait a second. This is the biggest earthquake, the speech of the century from, the proto-fascist Donald Trump, and you're not even going to it? We're going to go, You're going to go all watch TV with each other and check out how each other are reacting to it and then form your opinions based on, the group. You're not even going to the damn thing. And I remember last year, man, I made Matt go to the Trump speech. I was like, I made him watch
Kid Rock.
Kid Rock,
It actually was worth it. That was good.
Right.
Okay, this was fun. But I was behaving like one of these people. I'm like, well, whatever. We'll get the transcript tomorrow, But and this is.
But we even saw Hulk Hogan rip his shirt open, man. I mean,
that's right.
You don't want to see that at third hand. You want to be there.
You do, absolutely. And all this stuff about how Fleet Street operates, like I was debating whether to tell this story or not because it's a little bit embarrassing, but I actually had a very similar episode to what happened to William Booth in this story when I was stringing for a British newspaper very early in my career, and I didn't have a whole lot of stuff because they asked me to cover something on the day of the Russian presidential election that wasn't the election. So I made some calls, but I didn't get a whole lot of firsthand detail. But what I did get from the phone calls, I wrote the shit out of it. I mean, like, in other words, like I gave a lot of descriptive, detail, and it was about a plane crash basically, and I wrote about how you could smell the burning flesh miles away. Or
I'm sure that's true. Not that you smelled it,
right? Exactly.
But it's possible to smell it miles away.
So the next day I get a call like early in the morning, from those editors. And I think it's, I'm being summoned to execution, right? Like they found me out that I was handing it up in print. And on the contrary, they're like, we want more of that, like as much as you can get. So this is still like a thing in our business. Like if you can deliver entertaining, they'll take it under any circumstances,
Sometimes I would, he's before TV news, obviously, law, but the opportunities for this kind of fraud have only multiplied with electronics. And every once in a while, when I was working at Time Magazine, I'd be sent out to a story that was also being covered by the networks. Have you ever had that where there's like 20 vans with satellite masts and they're covering a forest fire? Let's say this is one case. Now, the forest fire is pretty far away, and I'm on foot and I'm on a writer. I'm just going to go down to the forest fire. They never leave the parking lot with the satellite van. They can smell the smoke from miles away.
Oh, right. Yes.
They won't even turn their back to see it or go near it. And it's like the conservation of energy. It's a Newtonian principle in journalism that, if you can both claim to be somewhat proximate to the story without having to go close to it, you will stop there. A certain number of journalists will stop there. That certain number being almost all.
Almost all of them. And this whole thing about when they can't leave the city, and so what the hell is the point of them all being there if they can't actually do any reporting? You would think that is ridiculous, and that that is not a thing that is replicated in the real world. But if you have ever done campaign journalism, if you're on the plane with the candidate and you have a Secret Service pass, you cannot leave. You are not allowed to leave the bubble of the plane. Once you've been wanded and approved as somebody who's inside the trust tree with the group, you must remain with the group. So when you, even though you technically you are flying from Seattle to Chicago and then from Chicago to New Orleans or whatever it is, you're really not going anywhere. You're just changing backdrops on what you do. But it's very important. It's so important to the companies that they had to be able to have the byline that says Chicago, Illinois, right? June 21st or whatever it is, that they'll pay lots and lots of money just to have a human being at a place when the whole thing might as well, you could do it in a soundstage, right? And just switch the backgrounds on it. So that's it's not ridiculous. It's just written here in a way that's very funny, and it all unfolds to William Booth as a great revelation. So it was pretty funny stuff.
So there we are in the middle, and it's going to unwind, and it's Booth's going to catch on, and we're going to see the story come to a very surprising and absurd conclusion. But I think one of the reasons we cover a book like this is not just so we can talk about old glory days stories from early in our careers, but so that the audience knows and has our endorsement for the fact that this is accurate. This is only, in some cases, a sort of piquant exaggeration of the circumstances, but is by no means a distortion of reality. It's painful almost to know that you were in situations, I was in situations in which we should have been subject to this very satire,
Yeah, no, you would think that this stuff is just a lark, a laugh, but it's not. It's these ridiculous little considerations, most of them financial, that dominate a lot of how information gets out to the public. And especially here, the fact that there really isn't a civil war, there isn't a great and this is very relevant to our current situation. There really is not this huge clash of ideologies going on. In fact, the overwhelming majority of the population has no idea that anyone even thinks there is something like that going on. However, it's the imperative of these these visitors from the West that they discover this conflict, and they're so determined to discover it that they'll write it into existence. And that I think that very much mirrors what's going on now, right? I mean,
it really mirrors also this factionalism that you were talking about, and we were discussing at the beginning of the podcast, all the MAGA meltdown or whatever, because a lot of the MAGA meltdown is reporting on a story that's actually caused by the influencers and commentators disagreeing with each other.
Right.
In other words, their disagreements and their mutual hostilities have become the story. And I'll give you an example. Last night, I'm not breaking any confidences. I see Laura Loomer. Last night, I didn't know this Tucker interview was coming out today, but I see Laura Loomer say, I am convinced that Tucker Carlson will run for president as a libertarian version of mark this space, Laura Loomer says. If you don't know who she is, then maybe you're luckier than most. But anyway, I text the source to try to check the story, and the answer is private in its wording, but in its essence, it's what the hell? But that tweet itself becomes a story, challengers to Trump begin to emerge, and so on. And they are having a they're having a group of civil wars in this camp that are mainly being waged by them.
Yeah, right. And that's right. It's not about actual people, and I guess we're making that mistake, or I'm making that mistake in this podcast. The things that are not a story are people getting along, people being reasonable, people having nuanced opinions about things. None of that is sexy.
But there's another, if you have a word search in your copy, search the word Harlem, like the neighborhood in New York City, because there's a wonderful little passage where Wah says that despite the fact that there isn't really anything going on in Ishmailia and that the ideological conflict is kind of fake, he says in the various areas of world discussion, London, Harlem, they're all debating the meaning of the Ishmaelian conflict and taking sides in it and so on.
Exactly. Yeah, this is it. Life in Ishmailia went on as before, and the Armenian merchant on Main Street, who had laid in a big consignment of white cotton shirtings, found himself with the stuff on his hands. In Moscow, Harlem, Bloomsbury, and Liberia, however, keener passions were aroused. In 100 progressive weeklies and left study circles, the matter was taken up, and the cause of the Jacksons was restarted in ideological form. So, yeah, I think we've been talking about this for a while now. A lot of what we see in the news is just the niche arguments of a fairly small group of people who all know each other.
Right. But providing grist for the salons, living rooms, dinner parties, and family rooms of the world. And the funniest thing as a journalist is to discover that the stories everybody's talking about, and you go to cover it, and you find out it doesn't really even exist.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody's got really strong opinions on it, and it's causing a lot of division and a lot of controversy, but it's actually not real, sort of.
Yeah, I covered one of those stories. You ever covered one of those, face of Jesus discovered in tree stump stories?
No, not quite.
There was one of those, like, pastor believes, like mold in wall represents face of Jesus or something like that, and it was in the South. I think I was covering the campaign at the time, and I went to this thing, and there were like a dozen reporters there, and it was like this vaguely, you could vaguely, I guess, make out eyes and a mouth if you were really like squinting hard. But there were like national reporters at this thing, and me. I was as dumb as they were to show up at this thing. And it was one loopy person who I guess somehow got hold of a local reporter, and just like that, it can become a national story. So yeah, fortunately, I'm pretty sure I ended up never covering that, but it does happen, and
oh yeah,
it's the demand that drives the copy, and not the other way around.
The reductio ad absurdum would be for everybody to be talking about, some fire and climate change, as did it cause it, and so on. You get down there and you find out there wasn't a fire,
right?
And you look around at the other reporters and go, well, can we say there's a fire? Can we at least say we heard there was? We met somebody who thought there was? It can be true in news that one of the biggest problems is that there's less of it than we need.
Yeah, that whole phenomenon of bargaining happens. Well,
right.
Well, what if we put it this way? Like, then could we have a story? Like that does happen. When the subject refuses to give you the answer that you want, and that's one of the reasons why Trump has been such a boon to the industry. Is that unlike somebody who gives you nothing,
right?
He gives you everything, right? And he doesn't mind being a villain, doesn't mind anything. He'll say anything you want, right? And
that's that's the reason why I think other people think I'm always being soft on the guy, but to me he's a new phenomena who I want to understand on his own terms and can't really use the old frameworks for it. And sometimes I'm like, is he just using sensory overload on us? Like after something good happens, he just has a whole unleashes a shitstorm just so we go back to this weird baseline of just not wanting to deal, or so that next time something actually bad happens, it won't rate or something.
Right. Yeah. Oh, we got to get up again. Like the stock market crashed.
Right.
All right.
But it is a little like he is the guy inviting you to cry wolf.
Yeah.
Keep crying it. Pretty soon nobody will believe you, and pretty soon there'll be a wolf, and you won't even notice. It's also funny.
I mean, we're also in this book heading in a direction that's sort of similar to the Graham Greene novel Our Man in Havana, which is like it's the same book. It's just instead of journalism, Our Man in Havana is about intelligence. And in that book, a sort of neophyte, just like William Booth, ends up being the protagonist. It's a vacuum cleaner salesman instead of a nature columnist. And he can't be bothered to actually do any intelligence work when he's recruited by MI6. He's living in Cuba. So he just starts making stuff up and sending it back to England. And they're horrified because they think that the Soviets are designing a giant vacuum cleaner that's going to destroy America. But it's the same story. And a lot of these people knew each other, these writers, but I think that they had a very good feel for the essential stupidity of this business in particular. And
well, this business is one which demands product, whether or not product exists.
Yes.
And it needs it every day, and it would like it to be at a rather urgent pitch and tone, and the world doesn't always cooperate in that. So, we have to, as they say, pull stuff out of our ass. And unfortunately, by pulling stuff out of our ass, we often change the situation or cause chaos. And, sometimes I wonder if the most charitable way to look at Russiagate would be there were these people like Michael Isakov and Korn and so on. I mean, and they make this big story up, and then everybody gets together and goes like, now we're on this train, baby. We can either get off it, who wants to be first, or we can keep riding it and all get our piece. Everybody has a share. It's sort of like Milo Minderbinder bombing his own island. Like, wait, we can make this story as big as we want it.
Exactly.
And we can all be stars.
Right. All we got to do is just keep,
Yeah, or we can kind of say, never mind, and guy got fooled and back off and everything. Like, in other words, sometimes the mistakes, if we're going to be charitable, or even the cheats, the mischief gets too big to fail.
Yeah. And we're approaching that point in the book. The last thing I wanted to point out, and I don't know the answer to this question. I'm assuming the character of Wenlock Jakes, I can think of a lot of modern analogs to who this is supposed to be, but there's a lot of incredibly funny spoofing of this person's writing style. And throughout Jakes' arrival in Ishmailia, he's writing a book, furiously writing a book called Under the Ermine.
Under the Ermine.
Yeah, it was to be a survey of the undercurrents of English political and social life, and they keep excerpting from this book, and it's almost like if you asked an AI to write a spoof of the most highfalutin nonsense that you would find in I don't know, like a Thomas Friedman book or something like that. But he describes meeting. I shall never forget the evening of King Edward's abdication. I was dining at the Savoy, and then he lists all the important people who were sitting at the dinner table, and name drops everyone. And then at the end, he says, I at once raised the question of the hour. Not one of that brilliant company expressed any opinion. There, in a nutshell, you have England, her greatness and her littleness.
Under the ermine.
Yeah, exactly. So this is stuff that's very funny just from a picking on writers standpoint. Obviously, Wall would be good at that, but it's particularly funny in this book. So I don't know. Any final thoughts today, Walter? Any stuff going on?
Let's see. It's Monday. Like I say, it's the middle of July, which I kind of think of as the silly season. It was a big July last year because of the Republican convention, the assassination attempt. There was the debate, there was the assassination attempt, there was the convention. Will Kennedy come on? There was Biden quitting in the middle or the end of the RNC. That's when we got that news, remember? It was just one thing after another. This year, it's kind of like a reflection in a pond, a shimmering reflection in a pond of all that stuff. I mean, we're all getting worked up, but kind of underneath, I think we don't know how meaningful it is, except for this Ukraine stuff. I think we properly located the thing that our more serious listeners and our more serious selves should be focused on. But it is a weird thing to look back 1 year ago at all the melodrama, the Sturm and Drang, the just crazy, unprecedented news. I mean, a year ago, I was on the Greg Gutfeld show, and during the convention, and Greg says, yeah, I just saw Trump. He let me feel his ear.
How often do you say that about a president?
Yeah, because remember he came with the ear bandage, and now we hear our year later, and I mean, we made it.
I know. I even got to read some of the Major League Baseball draft coverage yesterday. So
oh wow,
yeah, I mean,
normalcy achieved.
Exactly. So a lot of stuff going on. For those who are wondering about Racket, we've all been working on a thing, and hopefully it's coming out soon.
You haven't been meeting your 800 words a day? Is that what's going on?
No. It's just it's a complicated one, and it's taking some time. But we're at the home stretch. So
I have an inkling about the nature of this story, and I urge Racket subscribers to be patient.
It'll be there. And now I'm gonna go watch Walter and Tucker. So looking forward to that. Thanks everybody. Thanks Mr. Producers, and thanks everybody for hanging out. We'll see you later this week.
See you then.